Hello and welcome to today's video. So today is going to be a little bit different as this is not a live stream, this is a pre-recorded video and it's going to be the same video for both the YouTube audience and for the Patreon audience. That's because today I'm going to be doing an English language GCSE paper walkthrough. I'm also going to let you know of a little change in how this channel is going to work, particularly for the Patreon viewers. So when I do exam paper walkthroughs, it's going to be the same for you guys and also everybody watching on YouTube. But the change that I'm going to implement now is that I'm no longer going to be doing live streams, only pre-recorded videos. However, on Patreon, you will still be receiving exclusive bespoke worksheets and also lesson content for working through those worksheets. So for YouTube, with the lessons, we will still only be going over the theory. And then to watch the full lesson, which includes the worksheet I created that I will work through with you, you will need to join the Patreon. So everybody on YouTube, thank you for joining me. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And also, if you're feeling like you'd like to watch full lessons for my content, please join the Patreon in the link below. Okay, so let's get into it. Today we are going to be doing an exam paper walkthrough. So what I'm going to be doing is working through an entire exam paper. I'm going to be talking through what I'm doing as I'm doing it, but what I'm not going to do is stop and give you tasks to do or give you an opportunity to do that, because this isn't really a lesson. This is just for you to watch me work through the exam paper and show you what I would do in an exam situation. It's likely that I'm going to work through this quicker than you should spend in the exam, but do still bear in mind the timings that we've previously talked about and that I will go on to talk about in this lesson, even if I'm doing it quicker. Okay, so when you're in the exam, you probably won't be working as fast as I am here, so don't use this as a model for timing, use it as a model for technique and writing. Okay, so without further ado, let's have a little look at this exam paper. So I'm just going to scroll up to the top. Okay, so here we have an example of a GCSE English Language Paper 1, and this is the insert. So, at the front of the insert, you'll normally just have a description of what that insert is. So the source that follows is Source A, Prose Fiction, Chapter 1, Camelot, from a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. And then inside the insert, we obviously have the extract that we're going to be working from. What I'm going to do initially, though, and what I advise a lot of you to do, is to not start by reading the extract. I'm going to start by reading the questions. Okay, so I'm going to go through the questions, and the reason for that is simply so I can have in the back of my mind when I'm reading the extract what I'm going to be asked later in the exam, because your brain does a lot of work in the background all the time, all day. And so if you have already familiarised yourself, even briefly, with what a question is going to be asking of you, your brain is going to be very slowly working through that in the background without you even realising. And then when you come across the question, you'll find that you already have some ideas to provide for that question. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So we're just going to scroll down to the question paper first of all. So here's our question paper, and here are our questions. So we have the reading section first, which will consist of these 4 questions. This particular exam paper is written in the format of one particular exam board, but obviously it will vary. However, all of the skills that are being tested here will also be tested in other exam boards. They will just be in slightly different variations and perhaps combinations for the questions. So here we have Section A, Reading. Answer all questions in this section. You were advised to spend about 45 minutes on this section. Okay. So this first question is only worth 4 marks. I would advise that when you answer this question, you spend no more than 3 to 4 minutes on it. It should be an easy question. It's a question where you answer explicitly. Please see previous lessons to have more detail on that. I might do it quicker than that, or I might do it slower today as we get into it and as I'm explaining things, but no more than 3 to 4 minutes. So the question is, read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 9, so that's really important. Always make sure you're aware of which line numbers you're supposed to be looking at. as if you pick information from elsewhere in the source, you're not going to get any marks for it. And then list 4 things about the landscape from this part of the source. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to grab a highlighter up there, and I'm just going to highlight landscape, so I know that I need to be thinking about the landscape for that first question. Question 2. Look in detail at this extract from lines 10 to 23 of the source. I'm then given the extract again in question 2, which is very useful. I'm not going to read that now, but I'll read it in a moment. How does the writer use language? I know this is a language question here to convey the girl's feelings. So I'm thinking about language, which is all of my language techniques like metaphors, similes, and also word class like adjective, verbs, etc. And I'm answering about how language is used to display or convey the girl's feelings. I'm thinking about the girl's feelings. This one, I would say, I'm just going to write 3 to 4 minutes up there. No more than 10 minutes on this question when you get round to answering it. Right, I'm going to look at question 3, which is always written exactly the same. So you now need to think about the whole source. So question 3 is concerned with the entire text. This text is from the opening chapter of a novel. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? So I'm thinking about structure here. I'm not going to highlight anything in that question, simply because it's always written in exactly the same way, other than this little bit of information here, which specifies where the text has come from. But in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't make a great deal of difference. I'll just read what we could write about. Perhaps I should have done that for question 2. You could also include writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, sentence forms. Here, you could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that interest you. So again, this one's 8 marks like question 2. Sorry, I just had something on my screen there. So I'm just going to suggest again that you spend about 10 minutes on this one. Question 4, the big one for the reading question. Focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 25 to the end. A student said this part of the story where Hank wanders through the town, that's meant to be wanders there with an A, and into the castle grounds. The writer does well to convey both the great level of poverty and of splendour present in the town. So, to what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider the way poverty and splendour are presented, evaluate the way the writer conveys these, support your responses with references to the text. So I'm going to highlight in here the key parts that I'm looking for. I want to see convey the great level of poverty and splendour as well. So those are my key things. So I now know when I go back and read the text, I'm specifically looking out for the landscape, the girl's feelings, poverty and splendour at the end. So beginning, landscape, middle, girl's feelings, end, poverty and splendour. So I have those key ideas in my mind. Right, I'm now going to read the text. I'll read it to you, and you can read along as we go, just so that you're kind of with me on it and you know what I'm talking about when I answer these questions. So you'll always get a little context box like this, and that'll tell you where the text has come from. So this extract comes from the opening chapter of A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, a satirical novel by American author Mark Twain. In the story, a 19th century American engineer is mysteriously transported back in time to medieval England during the reign of King Arthur. Now, what some people like to do here is they'll start to answer question 1. So they will only look at lines 1 to 9. But I will suggest, if you've got time and if you're a fairly fast reader, it's a very good idea to read the source as a whole once before you then go and answer the questions. So the order of reading for me would be read the questions, read the text, then start to read the text when answering the question. So like reread the text and that part of the text every time you go to answer a question. So I'm just going to read this text once. First of all, so Camelot, Camelot, said I to myself. I don't seem to remember hearing of it before. Name of the asylum, likely. It was a soft, reposeful summer landscape, as lovely as a dream, and as lonesome as Sunday. The air was full of the smell of flowers, and the buzzing of insects, and the twittering of birds, and there were no people, no wagons, there was no stir of life, nothing going on. The road was mainly a winding path with hoof prints in it, and now and then a faint trace of wheels on either side of the grass, wheels that apparently had a tyre as broad as one's hand. Presently a fair slip of a girl, about 10 years old, with a cataract of golden hair streaming down over her shoulders, came along. Around her head she wore a hoop of flame-red poppies. It was as sweet an outfit as ever I saw. What there was of it. She walked indolently along with a mind at rest, its peace reflected in her innocent face. The circus man paid no attention to her, didn't even seem to see her, and she was no more startled at his fantastic makeup than if she was used to his like every day of her life. She was going by as indifferently as she might have gone by a couple of cows. But when she happened to notice me, then there was a change. Up went her hands, and she was turned to stone. Her mouth dropped open, her eyes stared wide and timorously. She was the picture of astonished curiosity touched with fear. And there she stood, gazing, in a sort of stupefied fascination, till we turned a corner of the wood and were lost to her view. That she should be startled at me instead of at the other man was too many for me. I couldn't make head or tail of it. And that she should seem to consider me a spectacle and totally overlook her own merits in that respect was another puzzling thing, and a display of magnanimity, too, that was surprising in one so young. There was food for thought here. I moved along as one in a dream. As we approached the town, signs of life began to appear. At intervals we passed a wretched cabin with a thatched roof, and about it small fields and garden patches in an indifferent state of cultivation. There were people, too, brawny men with long, coarse, uncombed hair that hung down over their face and made them look like animals. They, and the women, as a rule, wore a coarse tow linen robe that came well below the knee, and a rude sort of sandals, and many wore an iron collar. The small boys and girls were always naked, but nobody seemed to know it. All of these people stared at me, talked about me, ran into the huts and fetched out their families to gape at me, but nobody ever noticed that other fellow, except to make him humble salutation and get no response for their pains. In the town were some substantial windowless houses of stone scattered among a wilderness of thatched cabins. The streets were mere crooked alleys and unpaved. Troops of dogs and nude children played in the sun and made life and noise. Hogs roamed and rooted contentedly about, and one of them lay in a reeking wallow in the middle of the main thoroughfare and suckled her family. Presently there was a distant blare of military music. It came nearer, still nearer, and soon a noble cavalcade wound into view, glorious with plumed helmets and flashing mail, and flaunting banners and rich doublets, and horse cloths and gilded spearheads, and through the muck and swine and naked brats and joyous dogs and shabby huts it took its gallant way, and in its wake we followed through one winding alley and then another, and climbing, always climbing, till at last we gained the breezy height where the huge castle stood. There was an exchange of bugle blasts, then a parley from the walls, where men-at-arms in hauberk and morion marched back and forth with halberd at shoulder, under flapping banners with the rude figure of a dragon displayed upon them. And then the great gates were flung open, the drawbridge was lowered, and the head of the cavalcade swept forward under the frowning arches, and we, following, soon found ourselves in a great paved court, with towers and turrets stretching up into the blue air on all the four sides. And all about us the dismount was going on, and much greeting and ceremony, and running to and fro, and a gay display of moving and intermingling colours, and an altogether pleasant stir and noise and confusion. Okay, so I've read it once, that means I've got a general gist of it. I'm not going to talk anything about it because I'm just doing this exam walkthrough today. I'm not really teaching it. So I'm going to look at my first question, read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 9. So I'm just going to do a little bracket around that area so I know what I'm looking at. So it's those two paragraphs there. List 4 things about the landscape from this part of the source. So this is just explicit information. It does not need to be, you don't need to interpret anything. In fact, if you try to interpret anything, you might lose marks here. So make sure to only be explicit, write down exactly what's in the text. Quoting is the easiest way here. So I'd say, I might just say, it was as lovely as a dream, this landscape. It was as lonesome as Sunday. I'm going to sneeze. Bless me. The air was full of the smell of flowers. There's another thing, there's loads here. This is quite a nice one. It's not always this nice. And the buzzing of insects. I'll just add down to the same point, actually. And the twittering of birds, I'll leave that. There were no people, no wagons, and no stir of life. So that'll be my 4th thing. Okay. So I am just going to switch to my answer sheet. So I'm going to put number 1 here, and I'm going to write my first point. So my first point is that it was as lovely as a dream. I'm actually going to make that a little bit bigger so that you find that easier to read. There we go. My second point is that it was as lonesome as Sunday. So you can see I'm just writing exactly what's in the text. My third point is that the air was full of the smell of flowers and the buzzing of insects. That's a direct quote, so I'm not interpreting it. Smell of flowers and the buzzing of insects. And then there were no people, no wagons, no stir of life. There were no people, no wagons, there was no stir of life. So some of those are quite detailed. You could split them, but I feel that whenever you can split them and they're kind of saying the same thing, because this one here is talking about what's in the air, this one here is talking about the lack of what you can see, you risk losing a mark there because it's kind of part of the same point. Arguably these two could have been part of the same point, so if I wanted another one even, I might say something. The road was mainly a winding path with hoof prints in it. So I could say that as a... Yeah, so the road was mainly a winding path with hoof prints in it. Okay? Right, question 2. So let me just bring us back to that question paper. Okay. So... what's handy about question 2 is it's printed the bit we need to look at. So, look in detail at the extract from lines 10 to 23. We're thinking about language and the girl's feelings. So, if I was in the exam, I might reread this slightly, but I have just read it. So, I'm just going to have a little look through them. I'm going to find 2 interesting pieces of language here, annotate them, then transfer that to paragraphs, because 8 marks will be 2 language analysis paragraphs, each worth 4 marks. So, I'll do that. She walked indolently along with a mind at rest, its peace reflected in her innocent face. I'm then going to choose how her feelings change. Up went her hands and she was turned to stone. I think that's enough. Okay, great. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to copy just that over onto my question, my answer paper, so we can see what we're doing as we annotate that. So here we are. Right. Now, She walked indolently along with the mind at rest, its peace reflected in her innocent face. Okay, so if we look at some of the words here, so if we look at indolently, that means kind of like lazily. Rest obviously means to be at rest. Peace and innocent. I think all of Okay, so I'm just going to look at three of the words here. So I'm going to look at the word indolently, rest, and peace. So indolently meaning lazy, obviously rest and peace to mean relaxed and peaceful. And so what I'd say we've got here is a semantic field of of relaxation, which obviously suggests that she's very relaxed and happy. And then if I were to zoom in on another word, I might use this one because it's slightly different. So I'd say the adjective innocent. Now, what that potentially suggests is that she feels she's got no concerns or troubles. So it's not that she's potentially feeling guilty for anything. She's a troubleless child, shall we say. Right, over here, up went her hand and she was turned to stone. So this here is obviously a metaphor because she wasn't actually turned to stone. Suggests too afraid to move. And then up went her hands. She's defensive, isn't she? Perhaps if we looked at the noun stone, if we zoomed in on that in particular, apologies for my bad handwriting with this pen. I am blaming it on the pen because it's a bit laggy. There's a coldness there, suggests life sucked out of her, out of fear, perhaps. Right, I'm going to turn those into paragraphs. So let's go down here. So it's going to go straight in with my first technique. The writer uses a semantic field of relaxation in the line, she walked indolently along a mind at rest, its peace reflected in her innocent face, to suggest that the girl is calm and doesn't seem to have a care in the world. Before seeing Hank, she seems happy and content with her life. In particular, or I might say also actually because it's slightly different, also the adjective innocent suggests that she is a simple child who does not invite trouble and would not welcome it. I'm going to say however because there is a contrast here. However, the writer uses a metaphor in the line, up went her hands and she turned to stone, to suggest that her feelings change drastically after she sees Hank in that she is now so afraid that she is unable to move. She has put her hands in a defensive position to suggest that she sees Hank as a threat and but feels unable to defend herself. In particular, the noun stone suggests that she has gone cold, and the contented life that she had before seeing him has drained from her. Cool. Question 2, done. Right, question 3. So question 3, I don't want to reread question 3 particularly because it's always the same and I should know what to expect as long as we've done enough of these practice papers. So I'm looking at the structure of the text. The first thing I'm going to do then, in order to look at the structure of the text, is to go back to the source and split it into sections. And I'm splitting it into beginning, middle, and end so that I can talk about the focus shifts between these. So what I would consider to be the focus at the beginning of the text is the landscape. It's basically, if we're thinking about structure, we're talking about setting. And then we focus on this girl, but the purpose of this girl is really to show how unusual or how out of place Hank might be. So here we're using character girl, and then down here, it's back to setting, but it's more about the town and its people and to suggest what kind of place it is. There's kind of two endings here, really. We get the town, but we also get the grandiose at the end. But we are going to talk about that quite a bit in question 4 anyway. So we are kind of back to setting here. So when we talk about question 3, the key structural things that you can discuss are setting, character, use of time, and also perspective. There are obviously some more minutiae structural things you can talk about, like sentence structures and punctuation, and paragraph use, but those are the big hitters there. Okay, so with that in mind, I've got setting, character, setting. I'm just going to go ahead and make a start my writing, because with question 3, I don't actually have to quote. I'm not doing any language analysis, so I don't need to see the text as such. I've got in my head what I know the text to be. Obviously, you can keep flicking back if that's useful for you, and I may do, although I won't show you as I do, just so I don't have to keep switching screens. But I'm just going to get to writing. This is going to be 3 paragraphs, this one. So it's still 8 marks though, like question 2. So each paragraph isn't going to be as detailed as it is in question 2. So, okay. In the beginning of the extract, the writer focuses on the setting of Camelot. And then what I can do is I can kind of summarize what I'm seeing in that opening. And so Camelot seems to be quite a beautiful landscape, although barren, and it's mainly full of nature. With hoof prints in it, and now and then a faint tree. Okay, so there is a tranquil tone to this description, as we are told that it is a calm summer's day, and that the landscape is actually quite beautiful, with the smell of flowers and the buzzing of insects. The road is also a simple one with only hoof prints and the occasional tire. So this, they want me to spell it in the American way, but I don't want to. This pastoral, so pastoral just meaning of nature, this pastoral opening is used to emphasize the contrast between the industrialized present. Well, okay, so I know the entire story. Obviously, you wouldn't know this having read the. Emphasize the lack of modern invention and lifestyle present in Camelot. It is simple and and the landscape remains intact or remains untouched by human invention. Okay, great. Then I've got to talk about a focus shift. So in the middle of the extract, the focus shifts from the landscape to the character of a young girl. She too is described as beautiful, with her golden hair and innocent face. Her innocence seems to match the landscape. Actually, something I want to add to this first paragraph, because we always want to talk about why it's interesting for a reader. That's kind of the key, actually, for this question, because if we remember, that's what the question's asking. How does that interest us as a reader? So the reader is now interested, wondering who the first person might be that Hank meets, as the landscape seems fairly deserted, although the landscape encourages a calm atmosphere. There is a tension building as we wait for him to interact with people who might appear. And that leads us quite well into the second paragraph about the girl. Her innocence seems to match the landscape. Her demeanor changes. Not the American spelling again. However, when she spots Hank, and she appears to be frightened. The writer implies that this fear comes from Hank's strangeness in the environment, as the girl seems to not react at all to a man who Hank himself seems to think strange through the writer's description of him as, so I'm just going to briefly quote, I don't have to for question 3, but sometimes it makes it easier. The circus man. The circus man, suggesting he is quirky and unusual. The reader is now wondering how other people might react when they interact with Hank, as the girl's reaction has emphasized his alienation or his strangeness. Let's repeat that again. Strangeness in Camelot. Finally, the writer shifts focus back to the setting near the end of the extract, as Hank moves into a more populated area in the town. The town itself is described as simple, with windowless dwellings and poor, as there are naked children running around, and the area seems to be quite unsanitary due to the farm animals that are also living alongside the people. This is contrasted greatly by the introduction of the cavalry, who seem to have far more wealth. The reader is now questioning which group Hank may align himself with, and whether he is going to be involved in the politics of this environment due to the clear inequality present. Okay, there we go. Right, question 4. Hardest question. So, let's go back to the text, shall we? Well, actually, I'm just going to read... Yes, so I need to read the question again to check my line numbers. So, the question's down here. Line 25 to the end. And the question again, the showing the great level of poverty and the splendor present. So line 25 is from here. But I think I meant line 29 there. So yes, so that's meant to be line 29, so let's briefly change that. That's my pen. Ooh. See, it's all laggy. This is why my handwriting is terrible here. Oh, okay. Well, it's meant to be line 29 anyway. So, right, let's look at that. Let's look at line 29. Okay. So this is an evaluation question, which means we need to evaluate how well the writer has done this. So what I'm going to do is look for evidence of them showing the poverty and showing the splendour. I always feel like it's just easiest to agree with these statements because they're kind of shown to you in a way where it's really difficult to disagree, but it's quite easy to agree, and you're not going to get any more marks for trying to be clever by disagreeing with it. You're just going to have less to say, so we're just going to find evidence for it. So, okay, something about poverty here. Okay, let's go for this one. So, brawny men with long, coarse, uncombed hair that hung down over their faces and made them look like animals. So, my technique is my simile. And the fact that they look like animals suggests that they have, you know, perhaps they've not been looked after. That, you know, they're unkempt. They've probably been treated like animals as well. Again, ignore my terrible annotations. So it's just this pen. Let's have a look down here. Let's do this one. Hogs roamed and rooted contentedly about, and one of them lay. Yep. And then, so this one's again about the poverty. So I would say this is about the, this is kind of about the setting. So you can talk about language and structure in question 4. So it's to suggest that animals and people live here. And then I might talk about these verbs here. Or in fact, I'm going to talk about, I can get my pen to work, I'm going to talk about the reeking wallow. So, yeah, that noun phrase. What that suggests is just dirt. It suggests wallow itself suggests it's kind of as low as it can be, so kind of place that's been forgotten and neglected. Okay, and then about the splendor. So yeah, a noble cavalcade wound interview, glorious with plumed helmets, flashing mail, flaunting banners, and rich doublets and horse-class gilded spearheads. Through the muck and the swine. You see how maybe just go through it. We might not introduce that though. So here we've got a semantic field. Of riches. Yeah. Rich doublets and horse class. Wound interview. And then I might talk about the juxtaposition here with through the muck and the swine. So, sorry, my pen's being really rubbish. So okay, so right, there we go. Through the muck and the swine. So that juxtaposition shows their disregard for the poor. Right, okay, so I'm gonna just keep flicking back myself here, but I'm going to in fact I can just copy that, can't I? I'll copy that onto my answer page and get to answering so that you can see it as well. Okay, so with question 4, you kind of want a little bit of an introduction. So I'm going to say how far I agree. I completely agree that the writer, and then I'm going to use the words from the question. So I'm just going to flip back to the question a minute. Conveys great level of poverty and splendour. Conveys the great level of poverty and splendour present in the town brilliantly, and is able to highlight the contrast between them. And then I can just kind of hint at some of the things I'm going to be talking about. So we see that people are in such poverty that they are being treated the same as animals, but we also see some extreme riches being flaunted to these people in need. Okay, and then I can get into my first paragraph. So my first point is that people are being treated like animals. The writer, I'm going to use an evaluative adverb here to help my evaluation. The writer cleverly cleverly presents the people living in this town as unkempt and animal-like, to suggest that they are indeed being treated like animals. So with question 4, I make an overall point with an evaluative adverb. Then I can go into my language analysis like I did with question 2. So I can talk about this simile. The writer uses a simile in the line brawny men with long, coarse, uncombed hair. Brawny men with long, coarse, uncombed hair. Down over their faces and made them look like animals. Down over their faces and made them look like animals. To show that they are perhaps starting to resemble the animals that they live amongst. Due to their treatment. Then I might say one more thing. They don't seem to be have the dignity that human beings might have if they were able to wash and look after themselves. In particular, the adjectives coarse and uncombed suggest that these people are unable to help themselves, perhaps due to resources or resources. I'm going to add an adverb in here. Interestingly, so keep adding adverbs to question 4 because it's evaluation. Great. Paragraph 2, setting. Furthermore, to emphasize this comparison to animals, the writer successfully conveys that these people are living side by side with such animals in the same conditions, suggesting that they are considered equal within this society. The writer need another adverb. Brilliantly uses setting to show in the line hogs roamed and rooted contentedly about. Hogs roamed and rooted contentedly about. And one of them lay in a reeking wallow. And one of them lay in a reeking wallow in the middle of the main thoroughfare. I'll just put put that in the middle of the main thoroughfare, to suggest that these animals are not only not out of place, but they are worthy enough to take up the largest spaces in this town, suggesting that the people have no control over them and are considered the same. In particular, the noun phrase reeking wallow, brilliantly, I'll just say cleverly again, you can repeat these if you want. Cleverly emphasizes, what did I write up there for that? The dirt and forgotten nature. The dirt and neglect present in the setting, reflecting the neglect of the people in poverty there. Lastly, the writer conveys a fantastic contrast to this poverty with the insertion of the cavalry and their riches. He uses a semantic field of riches in the line, a noble cavalcade, not cavalry, I'll just leave it, it's fine. A noble cavalcade wound into view. Glorious with plumed helmets and flashing mail. And flaunting banners and rich doublets. And horsecloths and gilded spears. Spearheads. And through the muck and swine. To emphasize the hoarding of wealth in this society and how it all seems to funnel to one place. Having this cavalcade appear in the middle of the town we have already established as extremely poor only serves to emphasize this splendor further, and we'll go for its unjust nature. Furthermore, through the muck and swine shows their lack of care for the people in need, and there is a direct juxtaposition between the muck and swine and the noble cavalcade and horse cloths. The first is dirty and consider, yeah, the first is dirty and the second is impressive and majestic. Lovely. Okay, we'll just go to the conclusion. So overall, it is clear that the student was spot on when they said that. I'm just going to copy and paste from the intro here. In the town, as he uses a variety of language and structure techniques to convey the extreme levels of wealth and lack in Camelot. Particularly stressing on the sheer contrast between them. Fine, happy with that. Good. Right, now we get to move on to section B. So we're going to move on to the writing section, which hopefully won't take me too long. But again, you're going to be advised to spend 45 minutes on this section as well, which includes a little bit of planning, but mostly just writing a piece of creative writing for one question. So, you are advised to spend about 45 minutes on this section, writing full sentences. You're reminded of the need to plan your answer. You should leave enough time to check your work at the end. So you get a choice. It says your local museum is asking for fiction based on their displays for their website. Either write a story about a long-forgotten land as suggested by this picture, or describe a town based in the past. Now, I'm going to suggest that a description, so the second option, is the easiest one because you don't have to worry about plot. You just have to worry about structure, but the structure is just going to be a case of focus. So what am I describing now as opposed to next, and so on. I don't have to have a plot with characters though. So I'm going to go for the second one. A town based in the past. Now, to a certain extent, I can make this up. I don't have to be a history whiz to answer this question. But I have to make it at least believable, I suppose. So we don't want it to be a fantasy town. Although it could be, you probably wouldn't lose marks for that. So question 5. Now when it says plan, we don't want a long detailed plan. For me, it's just like, again, 3 to 4 minutes, same time you'd spend on question 1. A kind of a bullet point paragraph plan of what your focuses are. That's the key thing to get those focuses right. So first of all, a town in the past. I've got to think of a particular past. I'm thinking that perhaps it's got nothing really to do with what we've just read, so I'm not going to go that far back, but it just says the past, so I can do what I like. I'm imagining Back to the Future. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that film, but it's great. And in Back to the Future, he goes from the 80s to the 50s, and he turns up in the 50s where he meets his mum and his dad. But when he first gets to that 50s town, I'm currently seeing him walk around there. So I'm going to base it on the 50s in America. So I'm just going to write that down. And I know some things about the 50s. I don't know loads. But I can make stuff up as long as it sounds believable and it's quality writing. So 1950s America. That's what I'm going for. So the first thing I'm going to describe is a cafe. No, I'm not. I'm going to talk about just the street overall. Then my character, whoever is describing this, who's the perspective, they're going to go. No, not. We're going to go into a garage with a car. So there's a really cool car, and then we could describe the garage actually, and then get in the car. So inside of car. So there you go. That's my plan. That's what I need to do. I'm going to do like 3 paragraphs or 3 sections. I can split those into multiple paragraphs if I want. I'm going to be on a 1950 street. Then I see a garage with a car, and then I'm inside the car, and that's all I need to do. Okay, so I've got to think about some. I'm just going to start writing actually, and you can see if you can recognise some techniques as I go. Word class choices, punctuation choices. Yeah, let's have a go. Right, so. Arthur swam the air as I stepped off the curb and turned my head towards the bustling street. Like a teenagers jostled and shoved one another. I'm gonna put teenage boys. I think probably more like their kind of behaviour at the time. Across the road, the tarmac. Um, see about anyone. its place. Its rest was disrupted when the aggressive form of an engine knocked it from its seat and took it. So you can see here, sorry to go quiet there, I was just kind of writing as I went. The first 3 paragraphs here are of the street. Notice you can do it as one big paragraph, but within that I've got other things that I'm focusing on. So I'm focusing on the laughter that's made me look towards those boys crossing the street, and then the girls, slightly different paragraph, and then the sounds that I'm hearing beyond that. So we've got the rock and roll music moving into this engine, which has then brought my attention, or the character's attention, to the garage with the car. So I'm now onto the second part of my piece of writing. Spinning around like a ballet dance, I call it so the most beautiful piece of machinery created by man. Scarlet. Sean. Right, and now moved on to inside the car. So I've worked my way up into getting in the car. I'm now going to just be in the car and describe inside the car. It's getting weird. This guy really likes cars. Apparently, my subconscious really likes cars. They particularly like cars. Just imagining what somebody would say if they really liked a car. Um, uh, um, Short sentence paragraph. Um, okay. I might add a bit more in here actually. So, um, it's a bit more story-like than description, but it doesn't matter if one slips into the other. What could I describe? Move that around a little bit. I know it's harder to do when you're obviously in the exam. but you can still do some editing as long as you make that editing really clear. Right, how many words have I done here? Got to be aware of what's realistic with handwritten as opposed to this. So there's 382 words. I'd probably want to do a little bit more than that, but you can get the gist of what you'll need to do from this. Okay, laughter swam through the air as I stepped off the curb and turned my head towards the bustling street. Like a rough tide, teenage boys jostled and shoved. So reading through it's really important because you can correct errors, particularly with punctuation or spelling, as you go. Jostled and shoved one another across the road. The tarmac glistened silver and black, camouflaging the boys' polished shoes as they skipped across to the opposite sidewalk, hunting for ice cream. Girls, too, followed step, although they were more conscious of being seen by anyone as they cut the tight curls on their head and smiled timidly over shoulders at each other. Now, the thing is, I've not specified what time period this is, so I've only, hinted at clues here. Tight curls, polished shoes, kind of puts it in a place, and then the rock and roll music in a minute. As I looked up at the shimmering, spotless shop fronts, the faint beat of rock and roll music slithered into my ear and made itself comfortable for the afternoon. Its rest was disrupted, however, when the aggressive roar of an engine knocked it from its seat and took its place at the forefront of my attention. Spinning around like a ballet dancer, I caught sight of the most beautiful piece of machinery created by man. Scarlet paintwork winked at me mischievously in the afternoon sunshine, and the seductive headlights beckoned me over. A mechanic emerged from under the hood when he heard me approach, and I could see my look of innocent wonder reflected in his lined face. "She's a beauty, isn't she?" "She's a beauty, isn't she? Watch her for me for a minute." I could watch her for eternity, I thought, as the old man in overalls sprinted back inside his shop for a missing tool. My hand acted of its own accord and reached out to stroke the paintwork. The engine responded with a purr. Pausing for just a moment on the door handle, my fingers squeezed the metal, and the cool touch was an inviting ice bath on a hot day. Next thing I knew, they had found the steering wheel as the rest of my body sunk into the warm leather seats like butter on toast. The foot pedal allowed another growl to erupt from under the hood like a caged lion waiting to spring. A quick look at myself in the rear-view mirror told me that this car belonged to me, regardless of the paperwork. I could hear, there's a mistake there, the faint tinkering of wrenches and screws from inside the shop. The engine gave me one last encouraging growl, and I was off. Freedom at last. So actually, that is more of a story than a description, to be honest with you, and that's fine that happened that way. They are quite loose in terms of what they allow for your answer. So as long as it's a decent piece of creative writing, they're probably not going to mark you down for it, because you could argue that this fits one of the briefs, and that's absolutely fine. If it goes way, way, way off, sometimes they might penalise you for not meeting the demands of the question, but for the most part with creative writing, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Okay, right. So there we have it. There's the entire exam paper. To be honest with you, that probably took about an hour and a half, just over an hour and a half. So about, the same as your actual exam would take. Obviously, there was a little bit more of me explaining and talking through it as we went, so that took some time. But then I was typing, which would have taken less time, so it might have just evened out for that to be about the right amount of time thinking about it and spending considering the question. Okay, so thank you very much. Those of you on YouTube, please like, comment and subscribe for more videos like this, and also the lessons. I will be doing more exam walkthroughs soon. It might not be the next lesson, although it possibly will be. I'm thinking about doing the Language Paper 2 walkthrough next, and then we might return to some maths lessons as well. And for everybody on Patreon, thank you for sticking with me. Just for these exam walkthroughs, it's going to be the same content as the YouTube, but beyond that, you will definitely have some more lessons coming your way with exclusive content and exclusive worksheets to work through with me in the lesson. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine, and I shall see you next time.